Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 363 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our third book is called From Letters to Leaders, Leveraging Your Fraternity or Sorority Experience to Land Your Dream Job. So go and pick up that book today on Amazon. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, the Greek University team now has 3 members from Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, which is a great imbalance from all the other Divine Nine organizations. And today we will finally be hearing from a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, which will help us to have a more well-rounded conversation on diversity, equity, inclusion, and fraternity life today. To say that our next guest is a founder, speaker, and writer wouldn't quite capture who he is and what he does. Frank Jackson's company, it's called The Pearl Effect, is a research-based outlet for his own lived experience. It is the story of thriving. That is to say, a story of well-being despite circumstances. Writing, speaking, and educating is how Frank creates impact and conveys his story, because his story is the human story. Frank hopes to help communities and individuals change the narrative on their history toward one of the strengths, beauty, and thriving. Welcome to the show, Frank.
Hello. Glad to be here and glad to represent.
I've been looking forward to having you on the show for a while now, so I'm really excited that you're here and you can share some great information with our audience. I love you're wearing your letters today. That makes me feel good. I love it when students and professionals wear their letters, man. I want to see it all the time. It just makes me proud to be a member of the fraternity and sorority system. And, I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the foundation. And the foundation for many of us is that undergraduate experience, because you decided on Texas Christian University for your undergraduate career. So tell our audience, what made you decide on TCU?
TCU is near and dear to my heart. And I'll be honest, I'm from Philly and I had no clue about the school, but I was introduced to it by my sister who lives in Arlington, Texas, just down the street from TCU. And she really wanted me to come live there. So she said, just do a Texas tour. And I saw TCU, and honestly, they do a good job visually. It makes you fall in love if you step on that campus. I don't know the retention rate when you step on, but it's hard to say no to that application once you see the campus. So that was huge. Plus, I think on my tour, they had a taco truck and it was free for visiting students. So that helped.
Yeah, you see, free food. I mean, you could get a lot with free food. People underestimate that, but
Exactly.
I tell you what, that works. Yeah, man. I mean, listen, I grew up in New York. You grew up in Philly. For you to end up in TCU, I'm sitting there scratching my head. I'm like, how does this Philly guy end up at TCU? But it is a beautiful
super
campus.
random, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
All right, so you joined Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated there, and you became a member of Order of Omega Honor Society. So there were, a whole bunch of fraternities you could have joined. What made you choose Kappa?
And I don't even know if I'm able to say this, but I did my research on all of them. I definitely spoke to members, and really what it came down to, which is, it relates to the TCU culture overall, is community and the people I met. I did the research, I read about Kappa Alpha Psi, all the information that was online at least. And of course, I love the mission, achievement in every field of human endeavor. I see myself as an achiever, but ultimately it came down to the brothers I met. And there was one in particular that actually wasn't a student at TCU. He was there for the summer doing an internship or something, and he happened to be from Philadelphia. And so as I was making my decision, that connection and the fact that he was a brother in the fraternity was enormously influential in my decision to go for it. And now I'm happy to say that that brother and the brothers that were part of my chapter during that time are still brothers today, that I'm a part of weddings and things of that nature. And I wouldn't change it for the world. It's been amazing.
You see how people join people. You did your research and you looked at, I'm sure, a bunch of Divine Nine organizations, maybe even read Lawrence Ross's book about the Divine Nine.
Yeah.
But you know what? At the end of the day, it came down to a relationship. It came down to
Hmm.
a person in Kappa Alpha Psi that you wanted to join. And I think that's really what I want the audience to focus on is those relationships because no matter what you hear, no matter what you read, all of this stuff is great, but at the end of the day, it's the relationship.
It's the people, and especially with the Divine Nine, there's so much information that's not available for the
Right,
public. And
right.
so there's only a snippet you get. And so it's the people that can convey what it means to them and what it means generally through just how they move through the world and approach you.
Yeah,
So I agree.
yeah. Lawrence Ross has a big problem in trying to keep his book in libraries because it ends up getting stolen more
Yeah.
often than not because there's just not a lot of information about the
Right.
Divine Nine out there. And people just
Right.
want to hold on to it and keep it to themselves, so much so that Lawrence's book is stolen out of every library. It's terrible.
Hey. We love the things hidden in plain sight, but not written in words.
That's right. That is absolutely right. All right. So everybody today wants to preserve and enhance their well-being. I mean, you hear that all the time as it relates to mental health and other things. But you have this original theory that's called the Pearl Effect, which examines the unique ways in which the Black community, as well as other groups, preserve and enhance their own well-being. So give us some more historical context around this theory, the Pearl Effect.
Yeah, so the Pearl Effect was born at my time at University of Pennsylvania, and I studied positive psychology. So that's my background. And I wanted to learn more about positive psychology, specifically in the Black community and what that meant. And the Pearl Effect, I saw points in history where the Black community was able to preserve their well-being. So these are spaces, and in positive psychology, we call it positive institutions. And so these are spaces throughout history, all the way back to when we were first um, kidnapped and brought to this country, all the way to today, where despite the circumstances, despite the oppression, whatever you slavery, Jim Crow, whatever those circumstances were, where we created well-being, where we enhanced it amongst each other. So, an example I love to talk about is hip hop. In the 70s, 80s, it was started in Bronx, New York, with the context of the crack epidemic, right? So that's a very volatile time in the Black community. But this amazing musical genre is invented out of that pain. And now it carries. I mean, you got musical artists making millions, you got cultural icons represented in all industries. And that is born in a circumstance that people wouldn't say is positive. And so I became obsessed with this idea of how people do that, how our community is able to repeat that process. And I think today, with the talk of mental health and well-being, we're seeing it again, and it'll be interesting to see in a couple of years what people are doing in the Black community specifically to create another space where they can enhance and uplift each other, even if the world isn't necessarily pushing that as strongly.
Wow, that's really fascinating stuff. I mean, I'd love to see how that relates to other groups as well. As somebody who happens to be Jewish and Israeli,
Oh, absolutely.
I think about the Holocaust and what spaces the Jewish people needed to come up with in order to protect themselves and then uplift, right? So you can really apply this theory to a lot of different places.
Oh, absolutely. One of the pillar books in positive psychology is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Oh yeah,
And
that's
that outlines it perfectly, what the Jewish community is able to do. And I would say if anyone knows anything about the Jewish community, it's that they are indeed a community and they are tight knit. And the things that are created within them, it parallels definitely. I focus on my lived experience because it's easier, and I know it best, but it's definitely cross cultural.
yeah.
And I mean, Kappa Alpha Psi, fraternity and sorority, Divine Nine is an example of that. And it's a beautiful thing when you really sit down and connect it to well being.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think it's fascinating stuff that you've done here. And certainly, I mean, when you look at the Jewish holidays, for example, every Jewish holiday is the same. They tried to kill us. we won, let's eat. I mean,
Exactly.
that's literally the holiday, right? Every
Yes,
holiday,
yes.
name your holiday. So it kind of goes into that enhancing their well-being. So I think it's really fascinating what you've done here. I love what you're doing with the Pearl effect and how you can apply that across other groups. I mean, in terms of the current context, though, let's assume for a second that I am aware of ways in which communities continue to persist, protect themselves, and access well-being. And I think that's relatively true. So,
Mhm.
what can I do with that information now going forward to help other people? Perhaps I don't know.
I think you have to continue to encourage the enhancement or creation of spaces where that well-being can be cultivated. So this is related to food, right?
Yeah,
That is the easiest way to gather people. If you say happy hour, if you say um, we need to learn some information about we have a training for the Greek Council. If there's not food there, I don't know if I'm going to show up when I'm an undergrad, right? Food is the easiest way, and having a space where people can talk, break bread across
mm-hmm.
culture, within a culture, and then you can start to input the pillars of well-being, right? Whether that's enhancing meaning or talking about purpose, talking about self-care, whatever topic you want to focus on, it really starts in a communal space. And more meta is, churches. You have dance halls, skate parties, right? All these areas are spaces where people can gather. And unfortunately, when you see areas with low well-being, they lack these spaces. So it's about being part of the change to make sure those spaces exist.
I love that example with food. I think that's brilliant. I mean, if you are on a campus and you're saying to yourself, I have no connections outside of my own council, I don't even know who's in NPHC, then why don't you have like a free meal, make a spaghetti dinner at your house and
Yeah,
invite members of the Divine Nine to come over and break bread with them? I guarantee
exactly.
you're going to have better, conversations, and you're going to be able to work on things like well-being over food. I mean, we can both
Exactly.
agree. We might have totally different political beliefs, but we can agree on a good plate of whatever barbecue. Like, okay, like we can
Yeah.
agree on that. And
Yeah.
it starts there.
I pushed it too. What if even, those two groups made a meal together,
Yeah,
right? And shared recipes and things of that nature. I mean,
there you
the
go.
action of it is I could take a plate and leave, but I
Right.
gotta stay to make the food if I'm hungry, right?
That's
And
good.
so
That's
yeah,
really
going
good.
to each other's homes, going into communities and saying, hey, let's have a food as our hook,
Right.
but clearly we're gonna have deeper conversations.
And if we make food around culture, then now I'm starting to learn about your culture too. You know what
Exactly.
I'm saying? So if
Yeah.
you bring a meal that is designed around your culture, whatever that culture is, right? If I'm bringing, matzo ball soup, okay, there's a
Yeah.
story about that. We could talk about that.
Yeah.
So I like that. I think you're onto something here with food. I like that a lot. Now let's assume for a second that I'm leading a historically white fraternity or sorority, such as an IFC organization, a Panhellenic organization, but I want more diverse membership. Okay. I want to
Hmm.
grow and I see the value of diversity in my organization. So, how can I create a more inclusive environment so that way I can get a more diverse membership?
I believe it starts with curiosity. You have to be curious, and one of the biggest ways is showing up. So if I'm a leader of an ISC or Panhellenic fraternity sorority, I'm going to show up to those new member presentations or probates. I'm going to show up to the step shows, the hump nights where Divine Nine is doing strolls. And I'm also, I think, a really good way. I think Panhellenic, IFC, Divine Nine, they're all built on community and community service.
Mhm.
What would it mean for those leaders to encourage their members to do community service alongside members of the Divine Nine and having that visibility, being part of Martin Luther King Day and all these things, and stepping also off campus with those members into spaces that may be a little uncomfortable, but will give you insight into those diverse members, right? And giving you a little glimpse of their world. So now when they see you, they have a bit more comfortability and they're like, okay, that person might be down. They're curious, they don't know everything, but if the first time I'm seeing you is inside of your um, fraternity house, your frat house and sorority house, that's a little bit more intimidating and harder to have that dialogue.
Yeah, one of the things that I regret is not attending a step show until I was an alumnus. That was a big miss on my behalf,
Yeah.
something that I wish I could do over again and be more a part of. Because I got to tell you, today, as an alumnus, my favorite fraternity and sorority event is the step show. Okay. There's
Yep.
nothing better than that for me. That is the height. That is the pinnacle right there, is that
Yeah.
step show. And it perfectly showcases culture, and it's really the best part about fraternity and sorority life. I'm being honest with
Yeah.
you. Okay, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. And imagine sitting at a table and trying to explain it to someone, right?
Ah,
They ask the question, they're curious, and they're like, there's an energy about it.
yeah,
So, and it's less likely that I'll invite you. I mean, I might, but I may assume you aren't going to come. But you may, if you're curious, it's open to everyone.
yeah,
And you can still up, and like you said, that energy will it'll
yeah.
take you, make you feel like you can fly.
Yeah, there's no denying the energy in that room. I mean, if you go to a step show, the energy, I mean, you can feel it and you'll pack the house. Okay.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
people will come out and you're thinking about engaging, members of the fraternity and sorority community and retaining them. I
Hmm.
mean, that show is just tremendous. So I'm a big fan, and hopefully that curiosity, it starts with questions, and then by attending and being a part of that, I think you can truly appreciate other people's cultures.
Hmm.
And so it's just a fantastic thing. But, what about cultural insensitivity? What if I have a member of my historically white fraternity or sorority that, really doesn't know any better, and there's some cultural insensitivity going on there? How can we educate our members about different cultures and get them to want to know more?
Ooh, well, I I go back to the curiosity, and then
Mhm.
also the relationship piece of it. So let's say I'm an incoming IFC member
Yep.
and I'm having a great time in my fraternity and sorority. I don't know much about the Divine Nine. I may have just seen them there at a step show and I'm like, what's going on? That music is crazy. All right, I got to go to class. What if a part of my initiation, a part of my first year, or a part of my experience is that we all have a mandate in our fraternity and sororities.
Mhm.
I have to meet quotas for every type of category. I have to keep a certain grade point average. What if I had a cultural component where I have to learn or I have to attend, even better, right? Where I'm building relationships, meet someone, attend a Greek council meeting of the Divine Nine or another group. Um, where I'm not getting that proprietary information, the secrets and things, but at least I'm visible. And that way, if you do make that mistake, if you do have a moment where you don't know any better, there's that relationship piece there where I can say, hey, I know who that is. It's easier to have that tough conversation as opposed to the first time we're meeting, I'm angry.
Mhm.
I'm offended because people, I'm not gonna lie, Divine Nine is very sensitive. You go to a step show and then you try to duplicate things.
Oh, no.
Oh no, 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 no.
Oh, no.
But if I know that insert name, I'm like, I'll give you a little slack. Let's talk about it. Now we can have a meeting. I know the president of your organization, you know the president of mine. Let's talk and try to figure out how we can get past this. But if you don't have that relationship equity, if you don't have that curiosity, you're going to stop at the beef and you'll disengage on both sides.
Yeah, you're trying to build that reservoir of goodwill, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's really what we're talking about here. And I think that's true for anybody. I mean, if you want to be a successful fraternity president, I don't care what council, if you want to be successful, you better have a good relationship with the Greek advisor in the fraternity and sorority life office.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he or she is meeting you for the first time when the
Yeah.
what hits the fan, do
Yeah.
you think that he or she is going to be very receptive in this meeting? No. They want
Mm-hmm.
to know who you are. So that way, if something does come up, the university president starts making phone calls to the fraternity and sorority life office, he or she can basically say, oh, I know Frank. Like, we go way back. I
Right.
know that this is not something that he would normally do. There's got to be a good explanation for this versus get Frank here now and I'm going to lay into him. right?
Right.
So,
Right.
so, so I think those are two different scenarios, and it's all about relationships. I mean, that's really
Mhm.
what it comes down to. So I think you're absolutely right there. The other thing I think about when we start talking about fraternity and sorority life is how accessible fraternity and sorority life really is for today's students because
Mhm.
I mean, there are a ton of first gen students that are coming to college campuses today. There are a lot of individuals that are coming from low income backgrounds. And I want to share the fraternity and sorority life experience with more students. So,
Right.
how can we reduce this financial barrier of joining?
Ooh, the financial barrier is tough, because I think there you may have to get creative in how you are leaning on the institution and their support of Greek life, right? So, for example, at TCU, 51%, I think it may have gone up or down, of the campus is Greek. Um, that's part of the selling point is Greek life. And therefore, there's a lot of support. And so the conversation around, hey, we want members that may be from these lower socioeconomic backgrounds, but the price point of entry is like way out. Um, and you can lean on the fraternity sororities like the headquarters, but you should also be able to lead on the institution. And then also there's fundraising campaigns that all these Greek organizations run. How about some of that money allotted towards scholarships and things of that nature? That money, I always say, should not be the deterrent from joining. Unfortunately, it is,
Yes.
but that should be the least of the worries because it's such a great brotherhood, sisterhood, and network to be a part of that can really change your life, honestly.
Yeah, we need to do more, in terms of fundraising and scholarships, so that way we can give this experience to more people. I know that there are, councils that are working on stuff like that. We got to do more, and we got to look at other groups that maybe we're not pulling from. Take veterans for example that
Right,
come to institutions of higher learning after they serve in the military. These are ready-made leaders. These are people that were leading battalions. Like, you think that that wouldn't be helpful in my fraternity? You better believe it
right,
would be very
right,
helpful. So we have to find ways to reduce those barriers to allow them to join, and we get the benefit of the leadership that they
right,
already have because they're a little bit older than we are. But they get the benefit of being in a brotherhood, and that's what they're accustomed to in the military. So
right,
kind of everybody wins in that scenario, but we got to figure
mhm,
out that financial barrier. I mean, that
right,
piece is going to be really important for the growth of fraternity and sorority moving forward. Um,
exactly.
and I'm sure you're well aware of all the stigmas and misconceptions about fraternity and sorority life. I'm sure you've spoken to many members and potential new members about that over the years. What can students do about this issue of stigma and misconceptions to remove all of these negative perceptions around fraternity and sorority life?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's films about the that enhance the stigma and focus on hazing and these other parts. And it's really about, especially on the undergraduate level, what message are we leading with? Obviously, there's the fun piece, and there's the fine line between using the fun as the hook and using it as also the thing that pushes people away. Because what's the price of the fun? But if there seems to be a legion of community, and I keep coming back to this relationship and brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever relationship bond, and what that is based in. Is it based on your service? Is it based on inner Greek council relationships? Is it based on campus wide events? Or is it based on that party and those sort of moments where we're not our best, where that darker side and stigma will rise a bit, or that secrecy, that gatekeeping, that allows people to create their own messages. But if we're leading with the stuff that is our essentially our bread and butter, whatever age group you're looking at, that can help people be more curious on their end. And then they learn about the histories and all that stuff that really makes them fall in love.
Mhm. I love that. That's really, really good. Now, you know that we love good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast.
Oh
And
yeah.
I know there are some incredible restaurants in the Philadelphia area. So I need your opinion because I'm going to be going to Philly next month. I need to know where I should be going for a great meal. Where should I go to get some great food?
Well, I mean, I couldn't be from Philly if I don't recommend a cheesesteak spot, right? So,
That's right. So which one?
personally, yeah, hey, man, personally, there's two spots. There's Angelo's, which is great. It's downtown, South Philly area. It's great. They only give out cheesesteaks, usually until early afternoon because they run out of ingredients. That's how busy they are. Delicious cheesesteaks, and then there's lots of other places to explore within walking distance. But my personal favorite is Larry's. It's by St. Joe's University, and that was Kobe's spot, and that was my favorite basketball player. So that's one I like. But there, I mean, you talk about Philly food is secondhand. It's something that you'll find on every corner. You just got to be creative and just step out and try a place. There's food from every culture out there.
I love it. Well, you and Kobe have very good taste, and I'm sure that the food is absolutely delicious. So I'm going to check that place out next month, and I'm going to let you know what I think
Oh,
about
please do.
the Philly steak. All right, this should be good. All right, so Frank, if our listeners, if they want to book you to come and speak on their college campus, where should they go in order to connect with you?
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's actually mrpositivellc.com. You can also find me by Googling the Pearl Effect. And then you can go on my Instagram, Frank underscore the future. You can also find me by looking up Mr. Positive. And that's a good way to get in contact me. Shoot me a DM, shoot me an email, and you can book me at your campus.
I love it. MrPositiveLLC.com. Go and check out Frank Jackson, The Pearl Effect. Just look that up in any search engine, and you're going to see some of Frank's work. So, what can I say, man? I love the work that you're doing. I love your positive attitude because, as you can tell, I'm a positive guy
Yeah.
too. I think that's the only way to be. And just keep up the great work, man. I'm proud of you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And you've made me hungry with all this discussion of food.
Yeah, we need to get a Philly cheesesteak right
Exactly.
now.
Yep.
See, we can agree on good food.
Yes,
We can debate all kinds of things, but good food is good food. So I appreciate
exactly.
that. All right, to our listeners, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Frank Jackson today. If you did, make sure that you like it. Make sure that you share it on social media with some of the other students that need to hear from Frank. And we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, and we're going to see you next time.